I find these lists very interesting because notice how few adult books are on these lists. These are all children's books. And the reasons that they're challenged are, it's more about the violence in many cases than it is the sex. And that's something that we were certainly discussing. Why it's okay for there to be more violence in books than for sex. My question is, has anybody else's work ever been challenged? Has yours, Susan?
No, mine hasn't. I've had small challenges in little, but everyone was always back down very quickly, and I've not been challenged, which I find amazing.
I would say so.
Yeah. I think I have a theory for that.
What is it?
And that is, because I write in the first person about real people, the person whoever's challenging the book is challenging these human beings for saying who they are. And that might put a little stopgap. I don't know, it could be wrong. I mean, maybe I'm being naive about this, but I think that could be what stops them from challenging the book.
That is a really good point.
Okay.
Because it really does put the person face first.
Right.
In many cases, you're looking at pictures of them.
Right.
How can you challenge the experience that's obviously true?
Right. And I like to do it for that reason. It's their voices, not mine. Yeah.
Anything from you?
Nope.
Not yet.
Never had a challenge, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
And you?
Yes.
Good.
And always on religion. Yes. And it's funny because it ends up being like this list of religions, and it's all about the same book. And so in one book, I was accused of being anti-Christian and anti-Islamic and anti-Semitic. Yeah. And then I thought, right, I'm not going to write any of those anymore. I'm going to write about Hinduism because they'll be all right. And then, of course, I was challenged about being anti-Indian. And then, ironically, anti-Pakistani.
Now,
so I just think you just can't satisfy anyone, can you? Right.
Now, who is making these challenges exactly?
Well, the thing is, it all just comes from random noise in the background. I mean, we discussed the Amazon thing a little while ago, but I wrote my Ash Mystery series, the one about Indian mythology, because there's been this diversity thing that's been discussed, and I wanted to have a South Asian kid as a central hero. Right. First email I got was, oh wow, I've got an email. Somebody's read the book, says, how dare you write about Rama, the Indian hero, because you're not Indian. I thought, well, I can't help that. So it's all just random noise.
That's interesting. So that's challenging you culturally. I would call that almost like a micro challenge, or sort of a challenge that we don't think about when we think about challenges.
Yeah. But it's sort of when I'm trying to actually think, right, I'm trying to bring these a bit more to the fore. It's weird that actually the people that I had actually assumed would be supporting were the ones who are actually complaining.
I wonder why that is.
A sense of protectiveness, perhaps. That's the only thing that I can sort of hang on to. But I don't know, because then when you try and get into dialogue with them, it all just like shuts down.
That's usually how it works, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's hard to convince somebody when they've got their mind made up. I mean, I guess it would sort of be the parallel of somebody writing about Hasidic Jews who's not a Hasid. And then somebody who is writes and says, you got it wrong, this isn't acceptable, how could you? That's the first example that comes to mind.
Yeah, but I would have not minded if they'd gone through some sort of critique, say, right, well, actually, you got your facts, wrong, but there wasn't any of that. And so it's just like, how dare you? You don't have the right to do it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But then that's what you say to all censorship challenges. Mostly, we all say this is crazy. How can these people? But they think they have a very valid point, and they'll tell you. And they will tell you a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily crazy all the time. I think I do have respect for those people who, for cultural reasons, for religious reasons, or for personal reasons, particularly parents, teachers, health professionals who may have had a trauma around sexuality in their lives, that they're not able to deal with this material. And I think a lot of it is quote, we see it as crazy because it doesn't make sense to us. And I guess I want to say is, sort of in response to what all of you were saying, and Susan was saying, when I was in the midst of a long 5 years of working on It's Perfectly Normal so many years ago, I was warned by all sorts of people that it would end my career. Good people, friends, colleagues, that I shouldn't write about this. And we were told that we would be challenged, that there would be, books would be taken out of the library, stolen out of the library. It's all happened. It's very difficult for the librarians. And we even prepared for it. We had a group come in to my publisher who studied basically the right and talked about what I just talked about people's different beliefs. So I've never felt that every family, every school, library, you name it, institution should have my books, but in a democracy, those who choose to have it should have the right to have it, and people shouldn't be kept. If I decide I'm not going to buy your book for my grandchildren, that's my right. If you decide same for my books for your kids or for yours or for any nieces, nephews, and friends, that's their right. And I thought the list was interesting only because I think it has changed over time. And, you know, with this 20th anniversary edition, we're geared up to respond. And can't fight it, but you can respond and say, you know, we believe what's in this book is honest. Your story is honest. Your facts are honest. Susan's voice is in there of these kids are honest. And that's all we're trying to do. But we can't do too much more than that.
It's also the difference between saying, I don't want my child to read this, and I don't want any child to read this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you have you have the right to say, I don't want my child to read this, but not everybody's child.
Well, Sharon, I wish I'd kept count, but over the years, I've had several, I would say maybe 12, maybe 15, I don't know, librarians say to me in one way or another, I would never have your books on sexual health in my own home, but it's my job as a public librarian, and again, in a democracy, to have a range of well-reviewed materials. So I have your books in there, and I think they're fantastic because their cultural or religious, or whatever their beliefs are clearly their values are different from mine, different from the book. But they know what their job is for kids, and I think they're great. I think they're heroes.
That's kind of a wonderful thing to say. I wouldn't have them in my home, but they need to be in a library.
Right. I wasn't insulted. I thought.
Yeah, no.
I thought it was. I thought it was great what they did. They understood what they needed to do.
What's interesting to me too is the flashpoint. I mean, the difference between the sex and the violence. What if your book had been about all different ways to cause violence? Would that have been? Would there be as many challenges? There seems to be a much higher tolerance for violence.
Yeah.
In any book.
Yeah, I think violence doesn't seem to be a big problem. When my book on No Choir Boy was there was absolutely no comments about the violence that is in the book, and there's a lot of violence in it. And yet we're waiting to see what happens with Beyond Magenta, which is about transgender teenagers. It's too new yet to know.
This is a problem we've had for so long. I mean, I think it's always worth discussing. I mean, certainly what you have in your book, of course your books are violent, you like to say.
Yeah.
Have you gotten blowback?
I've got an issue with how violence is portrayed within children's fiction. Whether it's books, whether it's going to be comics, or whether it's in movies. And what I find appalling is that there's no consequence to it, right? And so, I'll go slightly on. Right, who here saw The Avengers or saw Superman last year? Right, in both films, New York or Metropolis was utterly, utterly devastated, yes? Not one person was harmed, right? And so I thought that was disgusting, actually. And so, you're showing all this carnage, yes? Entire skyscrapers, the whole city's wiped out. Not one falling body or not nothing. And so when I write my violence, I write the consequences of it. And actually that's I mean, I've had really good reviews, but they do refer to there being a lot of violence in it. And I think, yes, yeah, and people suffer because of it, yeah. And so that's where, and that's what shocks them. And I think that's appalling. What should be shocking you is that you can have violence and there be no consequences to it. So,
Go ahead. Nikki, I thought you did that in your book too. You talk about consequences.
Right.
And risks.
Of war.
And I thought you did it beautifully, so
Thank
I'm
you.
curious
Yeah.
about that.
Well, what we tried to leave out of the book were the gruesome details, but not because we didn't think that kids should be exposed to that, but because there's so much variation in the outcomes of different conflicts. So we didn't want to get too specific anywhere.
You should talk a little bit about what your book is.
That's a tough one.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating because
Thank
it
you.
talks about conflict and what it is, why it is, how it resolves, how it doesn't resolve.
Yeah.
And it's a different kind of nonfiction text.
It is. We set out to make a book that kids couldn't just go online and find, the facts. It's a really tough question to answer. Why do we fight? Because there's always so many variables. Every conflict, on the surface at least, is very different from the next one. But when you start to dig down to the underlying causes, you actually find that there's a lot of similarities in the root causes. And we wanted to give kids the tools to be able to take any conflict that they were reading about or hearing about on the news and have the tools to take it apart and understand it on their own terms and form their own opinion on it. I didn't want to tell them what to think about.
Which is in some ways paralleling,
Yeah.
This is what it is, this is how it works, this is what happens when
Yeah.
this happens.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're doing in your fiction, it is appalling when you watch a movie and you just see, or read a book and you see just all this carnage. And there's no people attached, they're like
Yeah.
extras or holograms or something. And there's no connection emotionally.
Well, and that I think is why, we keep talking about as a society, we're becoming desensitized to these things. But if there's never consequences
Yep.
to what you're seeing, there's nothing to be sensitive about. An explosion is just an explosion unless there's actual carnage attached to it. So I
And
think
then what
that's-
happens is the next scene is the person is, perfectly coiffed, makeup's
Yeah.
great, nails are terrific, and they're just going along to the next situation. There's no depression, there's no reaction.
There's no
it's
PTSD,
There's no,
Right,
exactly.
there's nothing.
It's weird. It's so unreal that it's...
Well, it's sort of like a Tex Avery cartoon, I mean, it's like when somebody kind of runs out, realizes that they're in the air, and then falls,
Right.
yeah.
But it's it endlessly fascinates that it's sex that people go nuts about,
Yeah.
or violence as it actually is, as best you can portray.
Yeah, I mean, what I thought was, the initial talk you mentioned, the Hunger Games,
Yeah.
and what was great was it talks about the trauma of an entire society that's being brought up with this terrible gladiatorial pressure,
Right.
and so that was, there was a real truth in that, and in the third book, the idea about children soldiers, etc., and the way that Katniss and the characters in book 3 have become kind of unhuman now. They're able to carry these things out and they've lost that empathy.
Right.
And so I thought that was really brilliant. It wasn't all a glorious happy ending and there were all flowers and everything. It was like the shock of this is how your humanity's been corrupted, even though you could say that there's a victory at the end of it. And I thought that was a really brilliant way to end the series.
Yeah, I think I would, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that those of us who write and edit and work on books for children feel a sense of responsibility to the audience, not to moralize, but to be moral in the judgment calls. Yes, Roby?
I think it's beyond being moral. I think it's being honest.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
I just spoke with a 12-year-old to ask her. I at my age, at my young age, it was difficult for me to read The Hunger Games because the idea of children
Right.
offing other kids, I just found it enormously upsetting. And then the other night, I was with some people who had a 12-year-old and a 40-ish year old mom said she had a problem the other person said, "Oh my God, the story's so good, the writing's so good, it's such a great story." And then so I said to the 12-year-old, "So how about you?" I was scared. "Were you?" She said, "It's fake. It's a story. I have not experienced war." I got to sort of think about that in new ways, and went on and on and on about things that I had never thought about until I talked to a child. And I think for kids who can't handle it, we talked about this at breakfast, they shut down. They don't read the book. That's their choice. That's fine. So, it's just the same thing we're talking about sex and violence. I don't think that kids who read about sexuality or sex, whatever you want to call it, immediately go out and have sex. Nor do I think that kids who read, some of the violence in your book, read about conflict, read about in Susan's No Choir Boy, that people are going to go out and commit acts of violence. They're just learning about a world, and I think they're learning to cope with a world which they will begin to know that is much broader than themselves. So I think it's a positive thing.
Oh, yeah. But the other thing that I always find fascinating, it's like parents who question this must not think much of their own parenting. If they're going to assume their kid's going to read a book and then just go out and do whatever the thing is in the book, it's a little crazy to me. I mean, you read so you don't have to experience, in many cases. You read so you can, do I ever want to shoot drugs? No, I do not. But I remember reading Go Ask Alice and thinking, wow, this is interesting. I don't think I'll be doing it. Although there may be somebody who read it and did go out immediately and score heroin, I don't know. But yeah, I think that in some ways parents have to trust their kids more and trust the way that they've raised their children better. Question about, I have many. Have any of you ever had an idea that you were dissuaded from pursuing? This is where we get into the interesting area of self-censorship or editorial censorship. Has there ever been an idea that you've been dissuaded, even within one of your books?
No.
No.
Not for censorship.
One has discussions with one's agent.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the classic, this first draft is way too much. Mm-hmm. And then it's all got to be, had looked at. I think mainly because with the Ash books, the mythology is about the death goddess Kali,
right.
and the idea that, human sacrifice actually.
Right.
And that was just considered beyond the pale. I found it fascinating because you could argue human sacrifice, there's something terribly noble about it, obviously if you're the willing participant, and in lots of ancient cultures it was seen as a very noble and very great thing to do for society. But then there's the modern sensibilities where...
But you also see people sacrificing themselves with bombs.
Yeah, and that's asymmetric warfare.
Mm-hmm. Asymmetric warfare.
Yeah, they don't have aeroplanes.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Right, okay, right. If you are in a conflict, you're going to use what is available to you.
Okay, this is where I lean back and let you respond.
Right, and so it's, right, if you don't have drones, if you don't have warplanes, if you don't have tanks, yes, but you do have your cooking materials and you do have people willing to go out and do what they feel is necessary. That's what asymmetric warfare is.
That's really interesting. I had not heard that term before. So your agent and your editors have never said back off, be less, do less?
No. We've discussed difficult topics and have, such as abuse, which I find extremely difficult to talk about because the idea of, and we know how prevalent it is. And when I was told by a marvelous pediatrician whose work was child sexual abuse, he said to me, you've left out one of the most important things. And I said, what is that, Eli? And he said that it can feel good for a child. And I slid down in my chair. It's something I didn't know. And I said, how in the world am I going to write about that because it's so complicated? And he said, you just said it. You can do it. But I in terms of the question about from an editor, no. But I do worry about the kind of self-censorship that might happen unconsciously. Whether you've been banned or not, I think it doesn't matter, because each one of us up here, and many of you in the room, and many of the editors, and I know that, have written about, people call them difficult topics. They're the day in, day out topics of childhood. And so, you know, I sort of wonder about, do we pull back? And I think in creating books, at least for me, is that I and the people who, my friends who are here, including Susan and Liz, you know, I go back and forth about so many of these topics, you know. Think about it at night and in the morning, how much information, how little information. And in the end, I end up saying, what's in the best interest of the child? And again, I've been told mostly by colleagues and friends, don't put that in, but not editors.
That's really interesting, that the editors are
At
the
least for
ones-
me.
Right.
You know.
Well,
Well-
early on, in the 80s, I was doing books that were they were considered edgy. Now we wouldn't consider them so. I did the first book on AIDS when the epidemic was really bad. And for that book, it was, forgot the name of the book. What's the name of the book? My husband forgot the name of the book. Here we are. So you can see how, at any rate, my editor said, I think you have to take the F words out because, and her reasoning was, there's going to be a lot of complaints about this book because it's a gay couple. It was the first book where it was a gay couple. One died in the first paragraph, you know, and so she said, I don't want people to say, I'm not reading this book because there's bad language. I want them to say, I'm not reading this book because I'm a homophobe, and they'd be forced to do it. And I thought about that. It was very hard to take those words out because I was worried about it not being true to the person, and I called the people who were in the book and told them this story, and they said, okay, take it out. Take it out. Yeah, I think you're right. And that's why I was able to take it out. But that was a censorship. It was self-censorship that we
Actually,
did.
that's an interesting point between the two, because the issue about the self-censorship is what is going to make the stronger story. Mm-hmm. And so what the editor was saying is actually this is going to distract from the main story.
Yes.
And so if there is a self-censorship that we do unconsciously, it probably is along those sorts of lines. So, right, if I put this in, is everyone going to focus on that, even though it's like just a minor passing detail? And so if it is going to distract them from what is really going on, then I actually think that self-censorship is actually very useful.
It's funny, it makes me think of, the higher power of Lucky and how everything got derailed
Because of the word scrotum.
because of the word scrotum.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
The dog.
Yeah, the dog scrotum, even worse. Bestiality, who knows? I want to loop you in because you had said that this book is the first book that you've written totally for yourself, yes?
Yes, yeah. I've done a lot of books for, I call them book factories. So, you crank them out very quickly and you write to a formula and you try to mask your voice so that it blends into the other books that they put out. And so this book was exciting and terrifying for me because I felt like I was out there.
What made you choose this particular topic?
It chose me, actually. My editor approached me after I had edited a book for Owl Kids previously, and he knows that I'm very passionate about social justice and things like that, and he said, we'd really like to do a book on global conflicts. That was about all he told me. And from there said, do you want to do that? And left me with that topic to wrestle with.
And he didn't censor you?
No, he didn't. He
or
didn't
advise?
He didn't censor me in terms of content that went into the book, but he was always the little angel on my shoulder saying, you're being too cynical, Nick. You got to pull it back. It's too dark. It's too, we don't want kids to come out of this book thinking that it's hopeless. Forget it. And so for me, doing the book was actually, It changed who I was, to be honest. And I know that sounds very hokey, but I went in far more cynical than I came out on the other side. I came out a lot more hopeful about humanity after going through the process of writing this book.
So this is good bibliotherapy for you.
Yeah.
That's kind of terrific. I mean, that's the other thing that we didn't actually talk about, how
Yeah.
doing the book changes you.
Yeah.
The thing that you brought up that I thought was interesting was a book that would have been seen as edgy, which is no longer considered edgy. And since we have more nonfiction than fiction, I see the edge so much in fiction. And we were talking earlier about somebody like Norma Klein, whose books were in the 70s very groundbreaking, and they could never be published today because they write about things like a girl who winds up living with and involved with her biology teacher. And that wouldn't happen today, not in a positive way, not simply as a fact. How do you see the landscape, and I'm looking at you guys on the ends, having changed in terms of what's acceptable and what's not
using
acceptable?
the F-bomb is completely acceptable now, so I'm freer to write whatever I want.
But what's not acceptable that used to be, do you think?
Oh, that's interesting. I have to think about that. Roby, what do you think? What's not acceptable?
I'm just curious, Sharon, why a book such as Norma's that you mentioned would not be published today. I mean, why it wouldn't be acquired. Is that what you were saying?
Well, it's funny. You could have the same situation in a book, but it wouldn't be portrayed the same way. You would have, I can think of at least 2 or 3 books where you have a girl getting involved with her teacher and it's not okay. It's very, very, very not okay. And to be fair, I mean, back then it also was not okay.
Right, exactly.
But the stress is on how it's not okay.
Right.
And sort of the whole predator-prey situation. I'm not condoning it, but I'm just interested to see what one could get away with because it was part of the social, people didn't question it the same way, which is actually kind of good.
Yeah, I think it's very good.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that, for example, from my work, did an early book of called Happy Birthday, and it's about the first day of life, a story about from the moment of birth through that first day. And there's a beautiful piece of art by Michael Emberley where the mom is nursing her new baby, and we had 3 or 4, and you barely see the breast. And when Michael and I were talking about it, I said what you want to have is the connection between the infant and the mother, that gaze that happens in those first few hours and can happen. It's that attachment that takes place. That's the powerful emotion. And we had 3 challenges and I think that would change today, but maybe not, that, no first grader, no kindergarten, no 4-year-old should ever see breastfeeding, when of course if one is able, it's the healthiest thing you can do.
And it could be in your house.
Yeah, well, this is in the hospital. This is not, this is a few hours after the baby is born. So is there more acceptance by many people, but there may be people who still feel that way? I'm not so sure. I think what has changed is the acceptance of LBG, and I hope T. That certainly has happened. But in terms of my work and chapter on abortion, I've just put in all these state restrictions that are really making it very, 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 very difficult. So I think there's still people who are going to fight what you put in there, and so the issues may change, but we still have this, at least in this country and in other countries, we have this divided world about what's appropriate for kids, and the question is who decides?
In some cases, of course, the kids themselves decide.
Well, we hope.
Right.
And that's self-censorship. In the best possible, I mean, I have a friend who's a first grade teacher, and we were all talking about this, and you all know this, in fact. I'm assuming there's kind of a choir out here. That children and teenagers will stop reading if material is upsetting or if they don't think that they can handle it. they know exactly what they can handle and what they can't handle. In some cases, as you pointed out earlier, just blows right over your head.
Yeah, there was... I mean, at the end of the day, what is writing? It's black squiggles on a piece of paper, isn't it? Yeah. And so there's a huge amount of unconscious interpretation that's actually being carried on as you're translating these black squiggles into something that you understand. Right. And if you don't understand it, whoosh, it's gone. I mean, can I give you my little anecdote about
Feel free.
this? Right. I'm a huge James Bond fan, even though there is that kill and quip aspect to it. Yeah. And so years ago, I was in the cinema, and it was like the first weekend a new Pierce Brosnan Bond movie had come out, and the cinema was packed. And in the row behind me, there was 10 boys, all about 10 or 12, all in dinner jackets. They'd all dressed up, and it was so great. They were all so really, really excited, right? And so they'd all come, all in their Bond outfits. And Bond is going for his Swedish language lesson. So there's the beautiful Swedish blonde girl, you might have seen this clip, right, lying on bed, and he comes out of the covers, and she says, "Oh, James, you're such a cunning linguist." Right, and the entire adult audience laughed, and the boys went back, "What's that funny about that? I don't get it. What did she say?" And so, yeah, whoosh. Yep. A couple of years' time, they'll find it.
That is wonderful.
Yep.
But it's true.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is absolutely true. I mean, I think we definitely see it in some ways more in fiction. You'll read a book to prove that you can read a thick book.
Right.
Well, you also see it with young children. I was doing an event in LA for Planned Parenthood, and this wonderful woman, whose house it was in, she said she was a lapsed lawyer staying home with her kids, and she had written 1 million briefs, and so for her 5-year-old daughter, she wanted to talk about, what makes a girl and all the physical aspects of it. She said, I practiced, I typed it out on my computer, I made sure it was only our time, I had drawings, she was showing drawings from the books, but she wanted it in her own voice. So she said her daughter, this is our special time. Her daughter sits next to her, and she said, I was really nervous. And so I began to read it, and I realized by page 2 I was doing a great job, and by page 3 and on page 5, and at page 5 I looked, and my daughter was not on the couch next to me. She was in another room that I could see. And that to me was, and she told this story on herself to talk to other parents, because we've been talking about parents a lot. But to say, don't worry. Basically, your kids will do just exactly what happened with these older kids. What does that mean? I don't get it, or I'm out of here. So, but I think there's a real problem. And I don't want to let go of it when we talk about kids, because kids are kept in this country, and more, and I worry about it more and more, from reading what they want to read, whether it's by the ratings that go on. We talked about this before at Amazon, whether it's about the book challenges that we never hear about because librarians want to, I say this with the greatest respect for librarians, because they want to keep their jobs, they want to keep the controversy low so that they won't lose their jobs, they only have so many hours in a day, they're not so well paid. Bookstore owners, everybody. So there's a real concern, and I think that's why it's really important for all of us, and there's so many writers out here in the audience and people in the book world, that we just write honestly and don't worry about these other people who are trying to, stop us. Just get it out there. But, I worry about the gates for today's kids and how narrow that becomes.
That is interesting, certainly. Do you guys think there are some books that actually go over the edge?
Are there subjects that go over the edge?
Well, go away.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't think so. It's the way it's written.
Yes. Yes.
And the way it's handled.
I mean, I think it's a
And
valid...
the age grade.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, certainly it's not acceptable to write for a 5-year-old about something that he or she won't understand.
Right.
But there's more that a 5-year-old understands than people think.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to say something.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah. It is actually about violence, but it's actually more to do with politics.
Go ahead.
Right. I'm a really, really big fan of historical fiction.
Right.
And I recently wrote a manuscript about the First Afghan War, because the parallels between the First Afghan War and what's happening right now is so incredibly strong. And the publishers all turned it down because they said nobody wants to hear about that right now. And so because it's a war we're losing. Yeah, and so nobody wants to be reading fiction about massacres if the next day they're picking up a newspaper reading. And so there's a sensitivity there. And I know that in Britain, there's certain periods in historical fiction that go on. We have loads of Napoleonic, we have loads of World War II, we have less of World War I because it was an ambivalent battle.
That's changing, though. There has been more.
Yeah, but so there is a sensitivity over certain types of violence, and also the fact that, in the 1980s, the guys that we're calling now the villains of the peace, the Taliban, we were supporting. So do you see what I mean?
Yes,
and so
I do.
that's why I found so fascinating about the First Afghan War. Exactly the same parallels.
And how do you deal with the enemy? Like, how did you deal with the enemy, the losers?
I was careful to point out that the enemy is just the person on the other side of the line, and that there's a quote in the book that opens that chapter that is, the enemy is somebody whose story you haven't heard yet. So there's always that sense of the other. There's always it's a label that gets put onto that group. Nobody is just an enemy, right? Mm-hmm. Enemies are created, enemies are made, and they're made up here. Mm-hmm. Usually through, not always, but often through a lack of understanding about where that other side is coming from.
And propaganda.
And propaganda helps, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That quote is from Jean Knudsen Hoffman,
Yeah.
whose daughter, Nina Kariki Hoffman, is a writer.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
excellent.
It's an interesting story. But yeah, it's a very even-handed and balanced approach. And what's really to me interesting about your book is that you can actually read any kind of fiction and turn your book to it and use it to break down the fiction. If it's a fiction about
I
conflict
never thought about
or war,
that.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's just as interesting a tool for a reader.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
Yes, I just thought of this, so I'm being brilliant for 1 second. I'm also going to now take a quick break and check our time. We started late, but I don't know if we can go late. We have roughly 1/2 hour before we're going to get booted. So do you guys want to throw this open to questions at this point?
Sure.
Go for it.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? And if you do, there are microphones. This nice man with the microphone is over here. If you have no questions, we can absolutely just keep babbling on and talking. But there is a question. Hello.
Oh. Oh,
Could you come to the mic?
right.
Yes. You guys have been super polite. Nobody busted in with a question or comment in the middle of our discussion.
Was it directed to a young adult audience or was it towards the...
No, actually, I wrote it as an adult book. And so, yeah.
That's a whole other sort of tangent to go off of. What's appropriate for adults? What can a kid handle that an adult can't handle? Which is another interesting thing. Yes.
I guess this is a question for maybe some of you. I just wanted to go back to the discussion about what's available to children so they could make their own choices. And I remember when I was younger, whether I was in grade school or middle school, college even, there are times when you're just in the library, you're just passing the time, aimlessly walking around the bookshelves, and something jumps out at you, you open it, and it's this whole other world, whether it's a book about conflict, a book about sexuality, something that you're not currently aware of. So sometimes I just worry that as publishing moves to digital only, that in itself is a form of censorship because you kind of have to know what you're looking for, whether it's your parents who purchase a book for you or give it to you on a Kindle or other reading device, whether you yourself, your friends recommend something to you, you're no longer browsing in the sense that you were before. So I just wonder if that's something that has ever been a consideration. How do you keep that world open to young people where they're still discovering something that they may not even know what they're looking for?
Well, it really matters.
It's a real big
Vera Williams and Liz Levy wrote a wonderful letter, which has been used and revised about freedom to read, freedom to write when there are book challenges to help the librarians. And one of the things which you two wrote in there was that if a child comes across a book by happenstance, I mean, sometimes they go looking for something, but that they didn't even know that they were looking for, and it strikes a responsive chord or something that they're concerned about or worried about or fascinated about. And I think you've raised a really terrific point. And I have a quick story of a child. I only found out about it because of a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I suspect that every one of you in this room who has done any work for children, that something has happened that you don't know about that turns out to be good for that child. And this was a child who came across It's Perfectly Normal by happenstance because her mother said, go to the library, get any book you wanted. And she read the chapter on child sexual abuse, and she went to her mother and said, this is me. And her father was subsequently convicted to 62 years of multiple counts of abuse and rape. And, you know, I have even trouble saying it. You can hear and in my voice. And I think if we all keep writing the books, and this is not just me, and actually the judge, they used the book in the trial, the judge said there were two heroes, the girl in the book, and I wrote him a letter and said, I respectfully disagree, there were two heroes. One was the mother, who clearly had a relationship with her daughter so that the daughter could go to her. And two was the librarian, who had the book on open shelving. Because what often happens to these books, and maybe your books too, and without knowing it, Susan, transgender, on war, on violence, that's not all your books is about, because I loved this book, and all of them here. But we don't know what's being, you know, what kids can't have access to and what a book can do. So, you know, if it's just for that one child, that any single one of it, I'm not touting me. It could have been any book on abuse. It could have been a novel. Who knows, you know, but happened to come across a book. Let's just take my name off it and the title. There's small changes that can happen. And there are big things that can change somewhat. At least the abuse stopped. And
yeah, you can definitely also talk about Laurie Haltz Anderson's Speak.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which has just opened up so many. It has allowed so many girls, so many teenagers, to talk about things that they thought were forbidden. And that's a marvelous thing. But I think the question is also about what do you do in a more digitized age when there aren't as many bookstores, when people can't browse in the same way, when you rely upon algorithms more than anything else. And a lot of them are bizarre, as I'm sure you know. When you go online and you're searching for something, BNN, Amazon, wherever, and they suggest some book that would make utterly no sense to anybody, least of all you, or some product, like a quart of milk, in addition to your book. They're flawed. They're absolutely flawed.
Yeah, you can't come across them by happenstance.
No,
Yeah.
and
That's a problem.
That's the serendipity that... Are you coming back down? No. That was unintentional harassment of mine. But it is a concern. It absolutely is a concern. And I know that we think about it a lot. What do we do about it? More book lists? I don't know. It's something I know I'm going to be bringing into my office to talk about more.
Right.
Yes. Are there other questions? Yes, Vera has a question.
This is exactly in the form of a question. You know, if you sort of estimated the general conversation and problems set forth at this panel, can everyone hear me? Thank you.
The mic comes to you.
Thank you. Okay. And other panels that we've had that bordered on this topic, you would get the idea that sex to a child or to anybody, that sex in our culture is generally a source of problems and displeasure. I don't know of any book for little children, and I certainly haven't written one myself, though I've thought of it a lot, that could express a little child in their bed at night, and I would be thinking mostly of a girl, but it could be also a boy, who had found the pleasures of their own orifices and the delight of it, and the smell on their finger, and there's the pleasures of their skin, all the things that people value in love and sex, or sex even not connected to long intimacy, but after all, your own body is your longest intimacy. That is not in children's books. And I don't know exactly how it could be.
I'm looking
Apart
at
from another thing that is
I
not...
don't think that would get past any editorial meeting, ever.
Actually,
Yeah, but if Vera Williams did it would be a spectacular book,
for kids.
right?
When you look what...
In my book, it's not historic for kids roughly 4 and up. I would talk about masturbation, absolutely.
Yes, no, yours does, and yours also has wonderful naked people in it, and they're funny, too. And it has asses and breasts and vaginas and penises and belly buttons and all those things that are very major parts of life to a child, But a book that, say, is more fiction, or a book... there is hardly a book that we have in which children who spend a great deal of time without clothes.
Yes, and that's
It
good.
exists,
That's,
a beautiful, and yet we all think that's beautiful and very touching. You have a very, so much of the experience of children. I remember when I was little, my mother had a lot of trouble with the lifeguards and the police on the beach when I was about 4. And I had a little kind of bathing suit, and I would run away, pour sand into the pants until it was so heavy that it fell off. And then I would take it off, drop it there, and run around without anything on. And she was constantly warned that she would have to keep a suit on me, right? But anyway, it's in this area that I want to say that there is really self-censorship, general censorship from publishers. I don't know if there would be from the audience, the buyers of the books. The children would probably be delighted, but they would also be embarrassed because they've been taught to be embarrassed. Yep. How would the teacher open this in front of 30 children who come from places ranging from Nigeria to Turkey to Alabama to New York City? And who knows what the children would say and what they would go home and say, right? How is she going to read this?
Well,
or show it?
from the boys I know of,
Thank you.
Thank you, Vera.
Right, whether it's embarrassing or not, I think boys find out about masturbation very soon and very vigorously. And so...
and continue.
Oh my gosh, whatever fiction we could produce would not touch what's going on in their heads. So.
Oh, I'm kind of digging this. I see a hand up. Can I throw in something, parent? Yeah.
Talk as an editor, how you might respond to that.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh, God. I don't edit picture books. No, sorry. How would I respond to that? God. I feel like I have the hardest question today because
You do.
Because it's really, what do you do? I know that, in fact, when we have books come in from other countries where it's much more acceptable, everything gets shut down in 2 seconds. You can't even get it past step 1. Interestingly enough, it's easier in nonfiction because it's something that's true, whereas you can't, even though it's also true in fiction, it's perceived as more subversive if it's in fiction. So how would I respond to it? You got me. I will be honest and say I have no idea. What I will do, however, is cleverly change the topic and read you the 2004 banned book list, which features In the Night Kitchen, which is challenged for nudity, of course, offensive language, and sexually explicit. Is there any sex in that book?
There's a milk bottle in the penis.
There's a milk bottle in the penis. Really?
Wow. It's kind of amazing. But yes, I knew that there were people who drew underpants on the characters and.
Well, actually,
Or who just take the books out. There's that other kind of censorship where somebody will just take the book out and never return it.
but I'm not a historian, but isn't what happened with the Sistine Chapel? They all end up being draped, and so
Yeah.
it's obviously absolutely,
Yeah,
Yes, but there was a period where, all these fig leaves started appearing.
Oh no, but then there's also the whole Victorian thing with limbs, not legs, and so I think that's why. Isn't that why you have those frilly things that go on the lamb chops? Isn't that? I mean, I
No,
could
that's
be,
so your the hands don't get greasy.
But I
mean,
know
it's
that
very serious.
I remember reading as a child about how they would cover up the legs of things, and you couldn't call something a leg; you'd have to call it a limb.
Oh, really?
Yes, because it was too inflammatory. No, seriously, it's.
So it's a limb of lamb?
I suppose an appendage of lamb. I have no idea, but it's amazing what people would censor.
Yeah.
But let's think about today's kids, okay? And tomorrow's kids. I'm talking about next year. They're so much more open.
Yes.
That's the hope. I mean, I talked about the worry, but the hope is that because our kids have been exposed to so much more in different ways, because of the internet, because of technology, I won't go on and on because we all know this all so well. They're also open.
Yes.
I mean, that's the positive side of it. They're also open and accepting. I'm not saying all kids, but many kids, to much more of whether it's what our society looks like or how we act or how we behave, and then when we talk about how we behave from loving behavior to violent to abusive behavior. I mean, so I think that's our hope in terms of this generation of kids.
There is always going to be a way to go. It will never be resolved perfectly, but I think, certainly in your research, a generation ago, people wouldn't have talked about these things at all, certainly when it came to trans.
No, not at all. I mean, I never heard, no one, even the kids in my book who are transgender didn't know what transgender was when they were growing up. And
this
it's only when they found out, oh, there is something that describes what I feel, that they were able to then pursue it more. And now I don't think that's an issue. And this is only within a 4-year period.
And this goes back to decades ago when nobody talked about homosexuality.
Exactly.
And there were kids who didn't know what they were.
Exactly.
So,
And even that has changed the terminology. I flipped it
Exactly.
around for the 20th anniversary edition where I first talked about homosexuality and heterosexuality, which you still talk about, but I flipped it to talk about gay and straight.
Yeah.
Because that's how the culture talks about people who are gay or straight.
Yes.
It's shifted, not everywhere, but
It's not
and
plus
that,
minus.
That lead is from the kids.
Yes.
That's what I think it can be exciting for us.
I agree. Yes, you have a question.
Sort of inspired by the previous question. I know Judy Blume wrote about masturbation and was specifically challenged because it was female masturbation.
Yeah.
And I believe that's Deanie.
Yeah.
Have you found either your sex or your violence has gendered problems if you're writing about girls or if you're writing for boys, or if you have different reactions based on what the gender is that you're describing?
That, in some ways, that's more of a fiction question than a nonfiction question.
Yeah, that's
Okay, this is Laurie Gwen Shapiro, author.
I
I've mostly written for adults, but I've written one YA where I was told by an editor that girls read faster, in basically that you have 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds reading books that are marketed to 14-year-olds, whereas boys are reading closer to the age that they are. They say, oh, it's a book for YA. They're closer to that age. So not to put explicit language in my book. And there was a friend of mine who was writing a book for the same publisher at the same time. And if you saw what got in that manuscript, it was quite amazing. And it was basically the idea that, and it's true, I have a 12-year-old daughter who was reading stuff that the content was above her head when she was 8 or 9. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that I personally, as an author, was told to take out certain language and content for a book that was probably geared more towards girls than boys.
No, people certainly do read up. I mean, we always talk about aspirational reading. You want to know what somebody who's older than you does, so you can model behavior. I think we tend, I would take it on a book-by-book basis. I think it depends on that character in that book and who it's for. You can't really generalize, in my opinion. But I think that you bring up an interesting and valid concern about some people want to shelter girls more, and so they won't put some of that stuff in. They won't say that sex ever feels good. They won't everything will be more cautionary or not even there. And I think that we just have to be aware of those things as we edit book by book by book. Go on.
I've certainly noticed in depictions of homosexuality, it's becoming easier and easier to find them, but the vast majority of them are of men with men.
Yes. I have much to say about this.
Lesbians are I am one, so I guess we're here. But like in fiction or even in nonfiction, there's still an erasure of that relationship, possibly because it is entirely female sexuality, and female sexuality is already erased.
Well, okay. This is something that is aggravating to me as well. But let's take a look at it from another side, which is who reads these books? Who's the audience? You're pointing at yourself, yes. But aside from you, I mean, and I'm just saying this as an observer, looking at it objectively, there are a lot of women who are willing, and girls who will read books about gay guys. There are not a corresponding amount of guys, straight guys, who would pick up a book about gay girls. And we don't know what to do with that. I think it's something that has to continue to be hammered at. I know I just started reading a wonderful book that one of our imprints is publishing with the female romance at the center of it, and I'll be happy to tell you about that book later because you will clearly want to read it. But I was delighted. I was delighted because it was just what it was. It was just a romance. And that's, of course, the next stage, when it's just a romance between two people, not a romance between two women. But yeah, it is a problem. I see it too. How do we fix it? I don't know. Just try to publish more, see if we can get more people to buy them. Does anybody else have any thoughts about this? I'd be curious.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing, but I'm talking about nonfiction, and I think you're right. It is different. But we go through a rigorous looking at the art, not just the text, to see, to make sure everyone's included. And the choices are they're just tremendous in terms of, size, body shape, skin color, cultural, straight, gay, biracial family, non-biracial family. I mean, you can go on forever, and it's actually very, very interesting, because if you then show what you've done to people, everyone has a change, right? Oh, well, we left out so-and-so, you put somebody in here. So, but I think certainly nonfiction, and Susan, you've certainly done that in your work.
Yeah,
And,
I have to show diversity in
Go
every
ahead.
single one of my books. It's very important that if you're writing nonfiction and you're writing about people, which is what I write about, that they be able to see themselves in the picture. It's kind of the phrase mirrors and windows. You see yourself and you see somebody else. And I'm very, very careful to try to be inclusive. You can't be 100% inclusive, but I certainly have lesbian families in my younger books, and I have gay families in my younger books, and so I just try to do that on and on and on. You know.
And I had no resistance from my editor to do this series. It's like a nonfiction narrative for young children that has a biracial family, and will be in 5 books. We've never heard from any review. They've never heard any complaint. There may be that we don't hear.
As opposed to the Cheerios commercial?
As opposed to the Cheerios commercial. Yeah, I know that well.
I almost forgot. Were you the one who was talking about literacy and illiteracy?
Oh, yes. That's actually a really valid point. Because in a way, aren't we just pleased that kids are actually reading? Yeah.
Yes.
And so who cares what they're reading? They're out there reading something.
Well, that's another panel. That's not this panel. It was the statistic that I wanted.
Yeah. I work for a literacy charity in Britain called Beanstalk, and the chairwoman of Beanstalk has come from a prison background, and the statistics are roughly 50% of prisoners are illiterate. Yeah, and so if the kid is there reading, great, they've dodged a bullet. And so it's almost as though you know, it makes the sex and violence discussion almost immaterial. The ones that are reading are the least likely probably to be acting it out. So it brings.
I would love the American stat on that.
It's actually quite similar, because there was an article by Neil Gaiman about 6 or 10 months ago where he'd gone to a talk, and I can't really remember the details, but it was very, very similar, where he met the people that build prisons in America, and they said, we work out the future scope by the illiteracy levels. So
that is a really, I mean, that's why I wanted you to say it, because it suddenly reframes everything on a certain level. I'm looking that we have 10 minutes. I'm being our own time clock here. And he's giving me a thumbs up. Maybe we'll take, 1 or 2 more questions? I see a hand. Hello. Okay.
I happen to be reading Little Women now.
Good for you. Who do you like best?
So far, Joe is best, but I'm just a quarter of the way into it. Nothing bad has happened. But one of the main lessons is how to be a good little woman. And I was thinking back to when I was a little man. And
that's book 2.
And in the 40s and 50s. And the literature I read was kind of the boys' literature. And we're talking about sex and violence. And it was very much gendered. I didn't read the girls' literature, but my sister, a year younger, we would talk. And the sex and violence was portrayed very differently, if at all, between boy and girl literature. Now it sounds like, from what I know about this, is there's the difference between the portrayal of sex and violence is much less in the literature that boys and girls read today. And I'm wondering what kind of effect that has on gender differences. Is it because, I don't know where I'm going with this, is it because boys and girls now both have similar interests, or are they similarly open to sex and violence? Is the sex and violence of girls lit different from that of boys lit? What effect is this having on the current young people?
I think that the issue then is more what is defining girls and boys lit, isn't it? Yeah. Because off the top of my head, I can probably think of 20, action heroines. But curiously, a lot of them are in crossover type of books, and the reason that they're successful is because boys and girls are reading them equally. So
Yeah.
they're not one thing nor the other. But I think it's more to do with sex then, isn't it? As you were saying, for girls, it's more of a cautionary thing.
Yes, it's more of a cautionary tale than it is. I mean, people talk, there has certainly been discussion about the sort of kick-butt heroine, but if you'll notice, she's almost always skinny. And she's, you know, she fits a certain kind of a stereotype, for better or for worse. But yes, I think for that you almost have to look at the contemporary books to see how girls and boys and teen girls and teen guys are portrayed in those books going through their day-to-day. Because, although this is a difficult question to unpack, because do you guys have any thoughts about this?
Well, I think it's more of a fiction question at this point. So,
yeah.
But actually, there's
there you go.
a mythological aspect to this.
Huh,
Sorry, I'm going to go really off. No, I'm going to try not to go
Feel
completely
free.
off tangent. But culturally, I mean, you know, we've had the Amazons. We've
Yep.
got, you know, I write about Kali, the death goddess. Yeah.
Yes.
And so actually, there's been, for the want of a better word, violent women throughout history,
Yes.
and have played a really bloody massive part. Yeah. And,
Well,
you know,
also even if you go back, look at the Greek gods and goddesses and all the
Exactly.
things that they do.
yeah.
And
the fairy tales?
yes,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
fairy tales. I mean,
Yeah. Pushing that witch into the oven.
well,
And I
what's-
must say, I really love the violent Amazons and all the women who are really out there and fighting. But when the men do it, I find it quite vulgar and terrible to see. And it really
sexist.
destroys
You
humanity.
sexist.
I know.
I'm disgusted. On this note, I'm going to ask each of you guys if you have anything, any statement, but also what you're working on right now, just straight across.
Well, I'm not working on anything right now because this book just came out on transgender, and all I want to say is I'm really pleased about the book because it is reaching people who are not only transgender, only gay and straight, but heterosexual people as well, so that it'll bring people together. And my whole point in all these books is that we are not others, but we are we, and that's my statement.
Nikki?
I'm not currently working on anything either. I made the decision to take the summer off, which I haven't done in a very long time.
Good
So,
for you.
yeah, so I'll start thinking about it again in September. But in terms of a statement, probably fairly similar to yours, Susan, in that I think it's important that we do keep pushing these things. I think kids are smarter and more curious about the world
Yes.
than a lot of grown-ups give them credit for, and they can handle and process a lot more than
Yes.
a lot of grown-ups give them
Yes.
credit for. And I think if you're going to turn your child loose in the world, don't you want them to be equipped with a lot of knowledge? And to me, that's power, to make sense of that world and to make good decisions with what they encounter. If you keep them from those things, what happens when you set them loose?
They suffer.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's great that you're doing what you're doing. I think it's great that everybody's doing what they're doing, and just pushing and you know, making people uncomfortable is not a bad thing. I think that means you're going in the right direction sometimes.
I like that. Maybe that will be a new motto. Who knows? And you?
More violence. Lashings of it. Actually, what's amazing, it's almost like... Right, as I've said, huge fan of historical fiction. We've had badass queens in England, so I'm working on a fantasy version of Elizabeth I. And part of that is a reaction to the kick-ass heroine who's running around sword fighting.
Right.
And, you know, and I thought, no, you can have incredibly powerful, potent heroines without them having to pick up a sword. And, you know, who better as a role model than Elizabeth I? So,
Wow.
yep.
Wow.
Well, since I have spent so many years with such a loaded topic, I thought I would pick another topic that maybe would be a bit of a breather. So I'm working on a book with my editor right now on race. But I did want to just add one thing, and that the title of On the Edge, and I love Penn, and I thank them for everything they've done to support the work that I do and all the wonderful work that they do. However, the title On the Edge, about 20 years ago, after It's Perfectly Normal came out, I was at the CCBC at the Center for... I can
The
never say-
Cooperative Children's Book Center.
Right, in Wisconsin. Anyway, and there was a conference on radical books, radical writers, and I was just first up on the title. And I said, I don't think of what I do as radical, nor do I think that I'm a radical writer. I think it's normal. I think it's what I believe. And we all said that in our own way. And I really feel that On the Edge gives it an edge that we're talking about what's in the best interest for kids and what's good for kids. And I don't think it's on the edge for kids. Maybe it is for publishers, editors, but I think we're looking at the topics, the concerns, the worry, the fascination that kids have today. And I don't know that they would call it edgy either. It's the world in which they're living. So I almost pulled back from that, On the Edge. There are people who would say we are, but I think most of us, I don't know if you agree, Sharon, everybody?
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's sort of just a child thinking, I am a child, I am a boy, a girl, it doesn't matter. What interests me. Tell me the truth about it. Give me the tools. I always think of fiction and nonfiction as tools to live in the world. To develop empathy, to learn how to build a wall in a house. You can learn anything from books. And you just have to be as honest as you can within that book. So yes, saying something is edgy is superimposing an opinion on it. That's true. So I think that stays just as true. Anyway, thank you guys. Thank you, and thank you so much.